I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. I've been in Eastern Oregon the last 3 days working up several stories, and I look forward to bringing you those in a week or so, and I've missed you. In the meantime, we have a great show for you tonight. We're talking about ambulance crews and how some are taking longer and longer to reach someone who needs help. That's our top story tonight. Depending on where you live, counties have standards for how fast EMS crews should arrive following a 911 call. Those standards range from within 8 minutes in populated areas like Portland to more like 30 minutes in some rural spots. Now, during a crisis, a minute can feel like an hour, so all of that is a long time. And while crews are doing the best they can, some are increasingly missing the mark. Investigative reporter Evan Watson has our story.
So I'm not basically saying that we don't have a problem. We do have a problem.
In February, Washington County Commissioners voted to switch EMS providers from Metro West Ambulance to American Medical Response, or AMR.
Each of the vendors was measured on 14 data points, and AMR was ranked highest on all 14 from the review panel.
Metro West, which is based in Hillsborough, is protesting the decision. Neither the county nor Metro West have explained what's being protested. Washington County leaders have been working on an EMS redesign for years, but the switch to AMR comes as Metro West's response times to 911 calls have plummeted. In February of 2022, Metro West was meeting county standards, getting to about 90% of 911 calls on time. By December, that number had dropped to 61%. If you had an emergency, there was a 40% chance the ambulance crew would be late.
Do you have any evidence that these slower response times are affecting medical treatment in any way?
Currently, we don't do compliance on any outcome-based or quality-based things. Ask me again next year after we have a new franchise agreement.
So with Washington County now planning to contract with AMR for ambulance services, will those response times improve? To answer that, we looked one county over, Multnomah County. AMR covers most of the Portland area, as well as Clark County and Clackamas County. I filed a records request for Multnomah County's data and sat down with the county's EMS medical director, John Chu.
How would you describe the current performance of AMR and the ambulance response times in Multnomah County?
The response times, they're basically falling off significantly from their normal response time. The fire department is basically doing their job in stabilizing the patients before AMR gets there.
Starting in March of 2022, AMR fell short of Multnomah County standards. By August, AMR crews were late to 1 out of every 4 calls that dispatch classified as life-threatening. Ju says Multnomah County has been lucky that fire crews are filling the gaps.
Because fire arrives first to provide that initial assessment and treatment, you're not seeing any negative impacts from that on the patient side.
That's correct. And I'm not making any excuses because something bad will happen. But I think right now we fall back on our safety net, and the safety net is our 911 system is actually doing what it's designed to be, with fire first response, getting there.
Is that too much of a strain or reliance on the fire crews getting there when they do?
It is, because honestly, the fire crews have their hands full.
Both AMR and Metro West declined interviews, but the counties say they're told staffing shortages are mostly to blame for the poor response times. Recruiting and hiring paramedics is a challenge. While AMR's annual report to Multnomah County shows that overall staffing levels have remained relatively stable over the last 4 years, Ju shared data showing how the number of 911 calls increased in 2022, diluting EMS response. In Washington County, EMS Supervisor Adrian Donner said every ambulance provider is struggling to hire and keep paramedics, so the data isn't a red flag for a new franchise agreement with AMR.
Is there any concern for Washington County that by adding this system with AMR and expanding their services that it could stretch them even more thin in terms of staffing and response?
Any time a ambulance provider moves into a new jurisdiction, they look for the people who already know that jurisdiction, and they're going to hire. No ambulance provider can expand without hiring more paramedics or buying more ambulances.
Both counties are looking at adding or expanding basic life support crews, first responders with less training and expertise than paramedics who can respond to lower risk calls, freeing up paramedic teams for more emergencies.
about 30% of our calls don't require a paramedic to be there. And we have devised a scheme or a plan to actually fulfill that portion here without a paramedic and basically increase the workforce as a temporary measure.
Until then, Jew and Donner say they're overly reliant on overburdened fire departments that are making up for slow ambulance response times. The last failsafe in a critical public health system.
We are, I would say, impatient to get the least solutions in the pipeline.
Evan joins me now. Super interesting there, and really fascinating that they both started to have slower responses around February, March of 2022. What did they tell you about that? Was it just staffing?
It mostly does come down to staffing, both retention of the people who already work there at these EMS companies and hiring. They mentioned that the companies did that it's tough to find that pool of applicants, that are qualified enough to fill those spots. But as to why the spring of 2022, there's not really specific reasons beyond the call volume increasing slightly last year and then just overall staffing problems catching up to them.
And so with that staffing problems, people are quitting and leaving. Why are they leaving?
It was interesting. In the AMR report to Multnomah County, the medical director there said that a lot of their staff members that are leaving in exit interviews say they're going to fire departments for stability or for other reasons. And he mentioned the violence that the EMS crews have experienced and also just tough working conditions in Portland having a big effect on their morale, on their willingness to stay in these jobs. You can imagine a tough environment to work in if it is that way.
Yeah, but who attacks an ambulance crew?
Right. I mean, we've seen a couple of stories like that, but also just the mental health crisis that we've seen in the streets of Portland and the issues that we have with that. It's part of the challenges that they're seeing every day out there.
Yeah, I'm not questioning that it happens. That astounds me.
Yeah.
What about the hospitals? We know that they've been pretty full. Has that been backing up ambulances as well?
Yeah, and that's the other interesting point in addition to staffing here, that it's not just related to how many paramedics that we have, but what's happening to the paramedics when they're on shift. So they're in charge of transporting someone from a 911 emergency call to the hospital. But when hospitals are full or at capacity, a lot of the time those ambulances are left sitting there in the bays at the hospital waiting to unload someone until there's space that someone gets discharged from the hospital and they can take them in. So the reality in that case, Pat, is that those crews then can't co-respond to other calls
because they have to stay there.
Delaying the process.
You can just see how it cascades.
The snowball effect. For sure.
So I guess the bottom line, if you think you're going to need an ambulance, call early.
Call early and also be expecting that maybe the fire crews will show up first and that will be initial line of response, at least right now, based on the situation and what we see in both Washington and Multnomah counties.
Okay, great stuff as always. Thank you, Evan Watson. Now let's turn to electric vehicles. And by the way, there is a Canadian company I checked that makes electric ambulances. That's probably a story for another day. Right now, though, I want to talk about the growth of electric vehicles in Oregon because I know a lot of you are fans. This chart from Oregon.gov shows the growth in battery electric vehicles, the green color, and plug-in hybrids, which are the blue part of the chart. You can see it goes up pretty quick on 2021, and then it's been a very steep curve ever since 2021. Which is the last time the state updated this chart. Here's a more current number, which has not been updated for about 3 months, but it does show there are now more than 60,600 battery or electric plug-in hybrid vehicles in Oregon. Most, as you would expect, are owned in Multnomah, Clackamas, Washington, and Lane counties. That same dashboard, by the way, showed that out in Grant County, where I was visiting earlier this week, there are just 9 electric vehicles registered. It is rural eastern Oregon, so no surprise there. And yes, my friends, I am thinking of you out there. But back to our focus. Oregon has 60,600 electric vehicles, which is an impressive number until you remember the stated goal by government leaders is to have 250,000 registered by 2025. Now, look, that's only a year and 9 months from now, so I wouldn't hold my breath if I was you. On the other hand, there is very clear sign that the EVs are super popular here in Oregon. 5 years ago, the Department of Environmental Quality began offering state rebates on top of federal money to get more people to buy electric vehicles. This graph gives us an idea why they did that. Take a look. The tan line is where the state wants greenhouse emissions to go, way down. The dashed line is where they were actually going as of 2018, nowhere near that goal. But by paying people to buy electric through rebates, the state was able to cut a bunch of the emissions and get onto that blue solid line, which is trending now closer to the goal. The incentives range from $250 up to $5,000 for low and moderate income households. The money comes from a tax charged on the sale of every new or newer vehicle in Oregon. It's actually a tax on the car dealership, but helpfully they pass it on to you buyers. So everything's going great, right? Well, not so much. The rebate program is so popular, it's about to run out of money. Rachel Sakata is the Senior Air Quality Planner at Oregon DEQ.
This program has really been a huge success. We've been able to issue more than $71 million in rebates over the lifetime of the program, which began in 2018. But unfortunately, because so many people have been utilizing and the rebate and purchasing electric vehicles, we're just running out of money quicker. And so it's basically, that's the reason why we're having to announce this temporary program suspension, is because we're running out of funds and we have to suspend it until the funds can be replenished early next year.
The state had $15 million for rebates this year. They will stop taking applications for the money May 1st. So if you're going to buy electric, the clock is ticking, gang. And by the way, it's possible the fund will run out again in 2024. Here's Erica Tim, the state's Clean Vehicle Rebate Coordinator.
We do see a growing number of people taking advantage of the rebate. So we do anticipate that with the annual funds that we are allocated each year, that we would likely see a suspension period again in 2024.
So that's not great if you believe local incentives are helping people afford electric vehicles. Jeff Allen is one of those believers. He's the executive director of a nonprofit called Fourth. They promote electric, smart, and shared transportation in the Northwest.
It's really disappointing to see this rebate suspended. Just when the electric vehicle market is really starting to take off, just when there's a lot of models available that really work for people's lifestyles, and frankly, just when folks are really becoming aware of the impacts of climate change. And this is something that anybody can do to reduce their impact and their footprint. And it feels like we've just sort of yanked the rug out from underneath people.
But Jeff and others who want to keep the momentum going are trying to convince Oregon lawmakers to pony up $30 million for rebates over the next 2 years. They have a bill that has been introduced this session at the legislature, but it has not had a public hearing, which is a very bad sign, by the way. He's still convinced, though, that the rebates make a difference and that money will come through.
When you think about all the things we're doing as a state to tackle the climate crisis, not everyone is in a position to put solar panels on their roof or to replace their gas range with an electric range. But virtually everyone in Oregon has a car, and virtually everyone is going to be looking to replace that car at some point. And one of the best things you can do for the climate is replace your old gas car with a clean electric car. We want to make sure that when people are ready to do that, that this incentive is there to help them make that transition and do it affordably.
So what are your thoughts on rebates and electric vehicles? Should taxpayers fund more rebates to encourage folks to buy more and help clean up the air? Is it a great investment, or is it a waste of time and money? Let me know what you think. Send an email. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you.
Disappointment for salmon fishers. Fishing season is now shut down for a good chunk of the West Coast.
So we have to make sure that we're not, undermining our ability to produce salmon for the next go around.
Turns out it was the salmon fishers themselves who urged officials to close down the season. Details when the story returns.
Let's talk about salmon and California. The state there has been getting hammered with rainstorms and snowstorms lately, but it's much too late to help salmon which spawned 2 or 3 years ago during a drought. And now we're starting to see the results of that with low numbers of salmon in California and along much of the Oregon coast. It's so bad that fishing for certain species has been canceled for the next several months. Environmental reporter Cale Williams has our story.
If you're planning to catch Chinook anywhere south of Cannon Beach, you're out of luck, at least in the short term. And that's because a lot of those fish come from as far away as Central California. Despite all the rain California's gotten this year, the long-running drought is still having a catastrophic effect on salmon. And that's due, at least in part, to water decisions made over the past several years.
I want to point out that this was all predictable.
Glenn Spain runs the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations, and he's talking about the recent decision to close salmon fishing in all of California and much of Oregon. The problem is with fall Chinook on the Sacramento and Klamath rivers in California. Those are the second and third biggest salmon-producing rivers on the West Coast. Spain says political decisions made as California has grappled with drought have pushed Chinook to the brink of survival. Water was diverted from rivers for irrigation, leaving them almost inhospitable to salmon.
The water that was left for them was way too hot, and they killed a lot of the eggs.
Fast forward to today, and the fish from that generation are now in the ocean. And experts say there are far too few of them to responsibly fish.
So we have to make sure that we're not, undermining our ability to produce salmon for the next go around.
And this fishing closure will have ripple effects through the coastal economy. Steve Fick owns a fish processing business in Astoria.
People come to the coast to eat the fresh salmon in the restaurants. That's going to be a challenge this year. The economics of it, you take just one 15-pound Chinook salmon caught off the Oregon coast, it's about 15 meals at $25 to $30 a meal.
Now, to be clear, this wasn't some top-down decision where the government told the fishermen they had to keep their boats in the harbor. The closure in California was prompted by a petition from Spain's own organization and others. It was the fishermen themselves who asked regulators to shut them down for the good of the species.
We are stewards of the fisheries. If we're going to provide for any fisheries in the future, we cannot be fishing on a stock that is so few in numbers that they're not even going to be able to replace this generation.
So far in Oregon, the salmon fishing season is closed through May, except off the very northern coast. But it's likely that closures, they'll extend at least through the fall, and possibly beyond.
We're in a little bit of a pickle there as far as being able to look forward with an optimistic view for where we'll be next year.
A decision on the rest of the year will come in early April, but regardless of what they decide, these dangerously low numbers of Chinook salmon, they're a good reminder that environmental decisions made as far away as California's Central Valley, they have ripple effects that can reach all the way up to the Pacific Northwest. Cale Williams, KGW News.
Thank you, Cale. Still ahead, the story of friends for life who come through for each other in good times and hard times.
Yep, good old Lee.
This guy here.
How one man helped his old friend as he underwent a heart transplant and brought some humor to the situation. It's part of a new series coming up here on KGW. We'll have that up next. We're debuting a brand new series here on KGW. We're calling it Pacific Storyland. It highlights heartwarming stories across our region and the people who are at the center of them. Tonight, we meet two childhood friends, one who nearly died, the other who helped him grow stronger through laughter every day. Catherine Cook and photographer Kurt Austin bring us their story.
Here's the running log of the vitals. First I do my temperature.
Every day, 4 times a day.
97.5.
For the last 3 months.
Your blood pressure.
Steve Ulrich has checked his vital signs.
Your systolic value is 133.
They tell him how his body
Diastolic value is 88.
is getting along
Your blood pressure is normal.
with his new heart.
So far, so good.
Steve's old heart began to fail in November at his home in Hood River.
And it collapsed pretty much a few days later, I guess, and they shipped me off to Providence St. Vincent.
It was here in Portland that Steve learned he would need a transplant.
The heart was failing quickly.
But before getting on a waiting list, doctors told Steve he would need something else.
Yep, good old Lee.
This guy here.
Lee Rubin.
That's right.
Someone who could help care for Steve post-surgery for 3 months.
Steve wouldn't have got the heart unless someone could commit to that time. And I didn't know it was going to be that long at first. But when they said 3 months, I go, okay, I'm in. What am I thinking? What am I thinking?
He might have been thinking of 1968, Los Angeles, the 6th grade. Here's Lee. There's Steve. They grew up together. The 70s were a bit blurry, but here they are again.
You do what you can for your friends.
And here they are again.
Like you said, there's no reason not to do this.
He was a good friend and was able to do that because he works from home.
This is the creative room.
Sometimes Lee even worked from Steve's hospital rooms.
Any room I was in, he had it all marked up.
And on the rooms, the doors.
I would change things every day.
The nurses loved that too.
The windows.
On the glass surfaces. Little tiny things to see if anybody would notice.
The staff.
Would you see anything that's new? So I had fun with it too.
Yeah. So they appreciated it.
Lee Rubin is the cartoonist behind Rubes.
A little philosophical there, but...
The single-panel comic is syndicated in more than 400 media outlets around the world.
Oh, well, this just ran. It's challenging, and I'm lousy at crossword puzzles, so this is my mental stimulation.
I guess I wasn't realizing I was inspiring some.
This was definitely inspired by Steve.
For Lee, humor is its own kind of vital sign.
It's a great way to deal with life. Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Steve and Lee's time in this rental house.
Oh yeah, I feel pretty stable. Because the two of us were doing pretty good.
Is drawing to a close now.
Amazing, huh?
Yeah.
Steve will head home to Hood River.
I'm so impressed.
You gotta take it slow and easy. They have me doing things like shoulder punches where you go out and then you pull your shoulder away.
And get stronger every day.
I'm not good at it yet, but you're supposed to do stuff like that.
Lee.
It's been quite an adventure.
Will fly home to California.
And I have a very understanding wife.
And there's one more person.
Losing a loved one. And,
the man whose heart.
A family going through tragedy and then I get to live.
Is now in Steve's chest.
Felt pretty, emotional about that.
A heart that will beat.
Yeah.
Every day.
That's right.
All day.
Yeah.
For the rest of his life. In Southwest Portland.
But that's what friends do.
Catherine Cook.
Oh, yep, it was really nice having him around.
KGW News.
He's right. Yeah.
What a sweet story. Pacific Storyland is just getting started. We want to know who or what is warming hearts where you live. Text your Pacific Storyland tips to 503-226-5088, or you can email this brand new address, pacificstoryland@kgw.com. In the meantime, keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. That's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. And remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll